Hi, this is Micornus, Phokane, the leader and the founder of Church Governance Solutions. We are continuing with characteristics of a servant leader. And I want to bring about these characteristics of a servant leader called love. A characteristics of a servant leader called love. Love is a characteristics of every servant leader. Because it's very important that you love the people that you serve. And you serve the people with love. Hence, you will be humble and you will use humility as you serve the people. Now, this element is an integral part of servanthood. And I'm sure you'll realize that servant leaders are not able to serve other people until they love them. Now, the love of leaders for their followers is the reason servant leaders serve, is their motivation as well. Because when you love your people, you go all out for them. And you are able to serve them because you love them anyway. Probably Jesus washed his disciples' feet 1 or 2 days after Jesus' instructions in Matthew chapter 20, verse 24 to 28. In Luke chapter 22, verse 24 to 30. Luke tells us that earlier that evening, the disciples had been quarreling again over who was the greatest. It is at the point in the gospel, again, over who was the greatest, and you realize that in the Gospel of John, that Jesus shifts from a public ministry to one focused on his own disciples. So he comes out of the public ministry, because public ministry was that which was saving majority and multitudes of people. But he comes to his private ministry, which is the ministry unto his servants. This particular evening, what he does is because they were quarreling early that evening about who's the greatest amongst them. And he has heard them, and he regarded it is going to therefore be important if I build the team by being with this team than being in the midst of the multitude. Now, those who would be the foundation of the future are the disciples. So therefore, he must build them first, and he must make sure that he develops those. Jesus is about to die, remember? And he was to leave the earth. And his disciples must be ready, must be prepared. And as the young church that was developing, as people are just newly born again, the disciples were supposed to grow and mature, to become servant leaders that learn from him in order to become servant leaders of the new church that has been developed by Jesus, who has died and resurrected. Now, a new fragile church that is just newly developed is very important, that the disciples learn servant leadership so that they can be able to lead the people. In the book of John, chapter 13, Jesus begins his farewell address, and he starts telling them that he's going, but he wants them to become servant leaders. His last words are always lasting words because they're very important, because he's actually saying words that everybody should be able to notice. Jesus notices that the disciples who were likely reclining around a table had dirty feet, and customarily a slave or a servant would wash the guest's feet when they entered the house or a home. Some would say this was the responsibility of the lowliest slave in the household to wash the feet of the rest of the people. Perhaps this is the reason Peter at first refused to let Jesus wash his feet. And when you look at verse 6 and verse 8 in this book of Luke, or the book of John chapter 13, you realize that Peter wanted to refuse actually. Peter didn't want Jesus to wash his feet. Regardless, no slave was present to serve the disciples that evening, and none of them was willing to assume the role of others. To have done so in their minds would have settled their own argument about who was the greatest by identifying who wasn't the greatest. For them, this would have been as an act of leadership. So this is very, very worrying, because they were actually looking at the occasion to capitalize on it. They were looking at the occasion to say, yes, we will see who will wash our feet, because whoever washes our feet then is a slave to us. Whoever washes our feet then is the minor one amongst us. So he's not the greatest. So by identifying who is not the greatest according to them, they would actually automatically identify who's the greatest, because whoever's feet was washed, then it would be the one who's the greatest according to them. But Jesus did it otherwise. What he did is he is the one now washing their feet. What an amazing incident that they were faced with. What a shocking incident that they were faced with. And they didn't actually expect that to come from Jesus. So they were all proudly reclined around the table with dirty feet, because they're expecting any one of them who's lowly placed to wash their feet. But they didn't expect Jesus to do that. They reclined to the table as a result. And I suspect that it was most obvious. So the Savior assumed the servant's role and he washed their feet for them. Look at verse 4 to 5 in John chapter 13, setting the example. In verses 12 to 17, setting an example as well. And he's illustrating what he had taught them earlier in Matthew chapter 20. Exactly, when he spoke about servant leadership. There is much to say about Jesus' teaching in this section of John's Gospel. He addresses betrayal, divine sovereignty, and cleansing, among other topics. So it is a rich text that you can look at, built on the foot washing. And that's a metaphor of service. That's a metaphor of considering others as above you. That is a metaphor of love that you show amongst the people. Because as a leader, you must show the love that you have towards your people. That's the only way you're going to be able to show your leadership as a servant leader, by showing the love upon your people. Now, I want to emphasize that in John, John makes it very clear that Jesus' motive was love, why he washed their feet. It was not anything else, it was because he loved them. And now, when they look at it, the interpretation may be otherwise, but he washed their feet, according to John here, because he loved them. At the beginning of this text, John tells us in verse 1, having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. And that's what John has written and scribed on this, to show that Jesus actually loved them. That's the reason why he washed their feet. The whole verse, with its emphasis on love, may be meant to set the tone for the lengthy section it has, because love then becomes very, very important when it comes to servant leadership. Now, servant leaders should love their followers. If you are to serve them, you must love them first. If you find yourself struggling to love your people, you're going to struggle serving them. So therefore, love them first, then you will be able to love or to serve your people after you love them. I suspect that had I been in Jesus' place, I would have thrown in the towel, not wrapped myself in the towel. I would have thrown it to somebody else. And I suspect you would have done the same as well. Because it's difficult to become a servant leader. It's difficult to be a leader and then yet wash the feet of your followers. And that's not easy. But with love, that should be done. Now, if you look at this, why did Jesus have such extreme patience with his motley crew like these disciples that were having issues amongst each other, that were not ready to serve each other? Why did Jesus have this extreme patience for them? John sums it up for us. Jesus passionately loved the men, and it was that love that enabled him to take up the towel rather than toss it in the towel. So what he did is actually held the towel on him and washed and wiped them their feet. The reason is because he loved them, and John is explaining it. John is outlining it before us, that it is because of the love that he had upon them. Here's the point. We will serve others humbly only to the degree that we love them. It is not easy to serve anyone that you don't love. And I must emphasize that love is the driver towards serving. So therefore, as an individual leader who is a servant leader, so practice love towards your people. Practice love towards your individual followers. And because of that, you'll be able to serve them well when you love them. It is by loving them that you will develop this service that you can serve them because you love them. You will become a servant leader because you love your followers. And the dirt on their feet will test our love as well for them. If we don't love them, we will take up the leadership towel only to toss it in that towel quickly when it gets a little dirty. And that will start making you feel like, I can't continue with this because this is a dirty job. But you will do the dirty job when you know that the dirty job that you do is because it comes out of love. Jesus loved his disciples, and therefore he continued to serve them because of his love. If we love our followers deeply, we will not only take up the leadership towel, but also to wrap ourselves in it. We won't mind a little dirt that will come along with it. And I want to end up here today, your host, Micornus, Phokane, the leader and the founder of Church Governance Solutions. Thank you very much for listening to us and being part of this great topic. I hope that you have learned a bit out of this topic. We're taking it up and making sure that we are helping you in this regard. If you want to learn more, please get to our YouTube channel and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. There are a lot of materials that we posted there before that will be very useful for you. So please get into our YouTube channel, Micornus Phokane, our YouTube channel, Young Men Empowerment Forum as well. So please subscribe to those YouTube channels, like or follow us on our Facebook page, Church Governance Solutions, and also on Micornus Phokane. And make sure that you follow us there. And may the good Lord bless you. And I believe strongly that you've learned out of this. You will be with us as we deal with other topics going forward. May the good Lord bless you. Allow me to check out right here and say cheers for now.